All right. Cool. All right, well, this is Attacker's Perspective, a technical demonstration of an email phishing attack. So my name is Zach Davis. I'm a senior penetration tester at a really cool company called Protivity. We got a booth set up next door. We do lots of different projects within the information security realm, so definitely stop by and talk to us. I'm a penetration tester. I've been doing this for going on 4 years. I also have a background in IT audit and that side of the security world as well. I want to talk briefly about my inspiration for this presentation. So when I first got into security and I was going to my first DEF CON, my first B-Sides events, I saw all these really, really cool tools that people were dropping, awesome techniques that you can use on a penetration test. But due to my limited experience, it was difficult to see the big picture and how you could tie all these tools together, from a penetration test from start to finish to go from, Googling an organization's domain name to domain administrator on their network. So basically, that's what I'm trying to do with this presentation. I want to show you how I run email phishing campaigns on a daily basis and how I do exactly that. So quick overview. This is going to be pretty high level, but I'm going to show you some recon techniques for targeting an organization. I'm going to show you how to actually create a spear phishing email. I'm going to show you one of my favorite methods of payload delivery. We're actually going to exploit a workstation. I have a mini Active Directory domain with workstations, servers, and a domain controller set up on my laptop. So we're going to compromise a workstation to gain an initial foothold. I'm going to show you how I do network enumeration internally to stay under the radar and be a little bit quieter using native Windows functionality. And then I'm going to show you techniques for moving laterally and elevating privileges, and we're going to try and get domain admin on my little network. So everybody take a second, pray to the demo gods. This is a really demo-heavy presentation, and more than likely something's not going to work given how this morning's gone so far. So quick background, I did not develop any of the tools I'm demonstrating today. I tried really hard to credit the right people, but if I credit the wrong person or say something dumb, please let me know. And a little bit about the target as well. I've done this talk or variations of this talk at smaller industry conferences several times before. And in the past, I always wanted to choose like a realistic target, so I thought I'd always chose the venue I was presenting at, whether it was a conference hall or a casino, hotel, whatever it was. So I was originally going to do that for this presentation, but I decided since there's probably going to be Drexel students here, I shouldn't teach them how to hack into Drexel. So the target's going to be completely fictional. Not all the pieces fit together quite right, but I think it'll make sense anyway. So let's get started. So one of my favorite scenarios when I'm going after end users is sending them a message requesting them to visiting a site, and I impersonate one of their network administrators. More than likely there's some of those network administrators sitting in this room right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to impersonate a network or system administrator. We're going to request a user to visit what looks like a trusted site. They're going to authenticate to this trusted site, and then they're going to be given a security update to install on their computer. In reality, when they log into the site, it's actually going to be my site. Their credentials are going to be captured, and when they run the update, it's going to be my exploit code. Before we get into that, we need to do reconnaissance and figure out, how we're going to attack and how we're going to draft our phishing campaign. This is definitely the most important step on a penetration test. The more information you know about the target, the better off you're going to be. There's some really simple tools that I find that work really well. I've been using the Harvester since literally my first day on my first pen testing internship. It's a tool coded by Christian Martorella of Edge Security. It basically, you feed it a domain name and it scrapes Google for email addresses and domain information. So I just wanted to show really quick. The Harvester, hold on a second. Really small. Does that look alright, everybody? Bigger or smaller? We're good? Alright, so the Harvester is a little Python script. You might have seen it before. But basically, you feed it some of these flags. Basically, you do -D for the domain. -L is the number of Google results you want it to search through. I usually do about 2,000. And then -B, you supply it the public available data source you want to go through. So as you can see, there's Baidu, Bing, Google, LinkedIn, Twitter. There's a whole bunch of different ones you can try. I always just use Google. I created some fake results to show you what actually comes out of this. So basically, if you look here, we have our harvester results. It harvested all these different email addresses from Google, and it also got us all these different host names and the associated IP address. So basically what we have now is we have a potential list of targets to send our phishing email to, and we also have some information about the organization's external infrastructure. So we can look through that, try and find a website, something trusted that we're going to be able to create a clone of and try and direct our users to, so we can steal their credentials and shell their computer. There are some better tools out there. Let me take a quick step back. A lot of times I also tie in who is lookups, just because it seems like a lot of network administrators like to put their name right on the domain registration information, even though it's really easy to hide that stuff today. So if you're on the blue team side, it's definitely something to think about. If I can go and just do a lookup on your domain and the network administrator's right there, then I'll do some LinkedIn and Google hacking, figure out who else works for the organization and if you're a good person to spoof as, and then I'm going to try and send my message as that administrator. Data.com is another really good data source. You basically create a free account. You go there, plug in an organization's name, and it will give you a whole list of employees and a bunch of other good stuff. Sometimes you can get phone numbers and things like that as well. There's also some better tools out there for doing reconnaissance. The ReconNG framework, coded by Timothy Tomes. Landmaster53, check out his blog. It's really awesome, a lot of cool stuff. And if you haven't heard of Shodan, that's more for the host side of things. So you can go and plug in an IP address, get a list of ports and services, a lot of times vulnerable systems. Again, if you're on the blue team side, definitely recommend going in and typing your own IP addresses in there and see what types of information attackers have on you. I know like a lot of botnets will use information from Shodan when they're trying to find their targets to spread their botnet. So to our phishing site, I kind of mentioned before, I like using generic portals, OWA, VPN, Office 365. These are trusted portals that a user authenticates to on a daily basis, so there's a degree of familiarity there, and they're more likely to enter their credentials. And you have the added bonus when I create a phishing site, I have them log in, then I feed them my malware, so if I successfully shell their system, I already have their password, which is a pretty good place to start if you're trying to do privilege escalation on the internal network. Another one I've been using a lot lately is a rewards site. Basically, I send a message telling employees that they won something. When people think they won something, they do not think clearly. I sent one where I said they won a bunch of Omaha steaks, and we ran it for like a few days, and like literally like a month later, I was getting angry emails to the inbox I had set up because people wanted their steaks. So definitely a good one to use as well. So I set up this phishing site. I just went for something really generic, which is Office 365. This is actually hosted on my Kali instance. Literally all I did to set this site up is I did a quick Google hack for an Office 365 portal. I did a right-click, save as, grabbed the files, threw them up on my web server, and this was the result. Sometimes it's not quite that easy. You'll have to tweak the code a little bit. And if we were going to use this for a real phishing campaign, you'd have to add some PHP into the form so that you're going to capture their credentials and get everything to work right. So you have that information when you're starting your escalation. But for our purposes, this will work just fine. Before we jump into that, I want to talk about the phishing email really quick. So with phishing emails, the biggest problem is always bypassing spam filters. There's a couple different ways you can do this. When I first got my start in penetration testing, all we would ever do is just spoof message headers. This is getting harder and harder to do every day as spam filters are getting better. But if you're not familiar with spoofing message headers, basically by manipulating the way you connect to an email server, the information you supply for the headers, and the information you supply for the body of the message, you can oftentimes send messages to like an internal employee and make it appear to originate from another internal employee. Or maybe you can manipulate the domain very subtly so that, again, it's going to look like it's coming from an internal employee. I don't do this very much anymore. It's hard to do, and honestly, it's just easier to go buy a domain. But when you buy a domain, you kind of open yourself up to some new problems. So some of the newer spam filtering solutions are starting to get better, and they're doing things beyond your typical SPF lookups and things like that. So what they do is basically every domain is categorized, and this is something that happens over time. So if your domain has any malicious content, or it's been reported with any malicious content, it's going to get dropped by the spam filter. Another thing it does is if it's been registered within the last few days, it's going to get dropped by the spam filter. If you're on the blue team side, this is actually really great solutions. I highly recommend it. It makes my job as a penetration tester a lot harder. If you're on the red team side, there should be some new tools coming out that are going to help you get around this pretty soon. At DerbyCon 6 this year is actually Will Schroeder and Sean Medcalf in their Evil Corp talk. Definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't seen it. They talked about a tool that Andrew Robbins is dropping called Eminent Domain, and basically what that allows you to do is scrape Google and other information sources for recently expired domains that have been previously legitimately registered. So you could find a domain that might fit your campaign that's recently expired. You can pick it up. It hasn't been registered for the first time, so it's going to bypass that first level of time-based spam check. And then it's also probably been already categorized as safe, and it takes a while for these things to update, so you might be able to get your message through using a recently expired domain. Another problem is if you're including a link in the message, like I typically do. Solutions like Proofpoint are starting to try and filter and obfuscate those links, so we're always looking for ways around that. I found that simple is sometimes the better answer. I was working on a pen test a few weeks ago where they had a solution that was basically just kept stripping out my links, sending my message to spam, and what I finally did was I typed up my message, I took a screenshot of it, deleted all the text, stuck the screenshot in the message, and then I hyperlinked directly to the image. So it still looked like an email, but all it was one big image, and the link still worked, and went right through to the user's inbox. The link wasn't stripped out, everything worked just like I wanted. So sometimes simple answers like that work really well. And finally, presentation is everything. So the better your message looks, the better off you're going to be. And I'm not it doesn't have to necessarily make sense if you're targeting end users. If you throw security buzzwords in there, it usually works pretty well, but making it look really nice and clean is really important. So real quick, the message that I drafted, the mock message, this is based on a variation I use all the time. So it just says, can everybody see that? Office 365 security improvements. The Office 365 webmail portal has been updated to include new security features. All new employees must confirm access within the next 24 hours. So we're creating a sense of urgency. They need to do this or they're going to lose access to their email. Please use the following link to log into the portal and download the update so corporate IT can confirm the installed enhanced security features. That doesn't really make much sense, but you throw enough buzzwords in there and they'll click on it. After logging in, click on the update button to automatically download and install the update. And then I throw a logo in there, and I always put whatever email I'm sending the message from, because usually when I buy a domain, you can set up a free webmail inbox, set it up as help desk or the admin you're spoofing as, and include that down there. People will always reply to the attacker, I've found. And a lot of times I'll send an email message and they'll reply back, is this a phishing email? And I respond back, of course not. Install the update. You need this. So there's our message. So the parts are starting to come together. Before we go any farther, I want to talk really quickly about just my network setup. So basically, we have a Kali Linux VM, a Windows 7 VM, and then 2 servers with Windows Server 2008, a domain controller, and an app server. They're all sitting on the same virtual network on my Mac, but we're going to pretend there's a firewall in between Kali and everything else. So I'm not going to communicate directly from Kali to the domain controller or the app server. All we're going to do is we're going to shell workstation 01, and all traffic from that point on needs to be funneled through that session in our imaginary firewall, just like a real phishing campaign. So now let's get on to the cool stuff, payload delivery. So one of my favorite payload delivery methods is ClickOnce. Has anybody ever heard of Microsoft ClickOnce? Know what that does? Couple. So basically what Microsoft ClickOnce is, it's a tool that Microsoft develops that allows administrators to have end users install updates and make configuration changes. One of the cool things about it is a lot of times you can get it to run with elevated privileges. So obviously someone figured out how to weaponize this. Ryan Gandrud dropped the weaponization of ClickOnce at, I think it was B-Sides Las Vegas 2015. He's got a really awesome blog post on this, and if you haven't checked out NetSpy's blog, there's a lot of really cool stuff on there as well, so I definitely recommend hitting it up. So basically, with ClickOnce, you're having Microsoft run your code. What you're going to make is a .NET console application written in C#. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. When Ryan originally set this up, he had it run an executable file generated by the Veil framework. It's since been modified. You can run PowerShell. You can do a lot of different things. And what's awesome about ClickOnce is you're running within the context of a trusted Microsoft binary. So any code that you feed through it is going to be running in that trusted space, and a lot of times application whitelisting solutions will be bypassed. So a couple different things you can do. What I'm going to be doing is just running a straight PowerShell command. So my C# is basically just going to open up a command prompt and execute a command for me. But there's other cooler things you can do. I would definitely recommend checking out Justin Warner, 6dub. He's got a post on integrating his SharpPick tool into ClickOnce. And if you haven't heard of SharpPick, basically it's a method for bypassing application whitelisting with PowerShell. So you use the system management automation DLL to basically spin up a PowerShell run space. And even if they're blocking PowerShell.exe, you can still get all the functionality of PowerShell through that method. So really cool. Definitely recommend going and checking out that blog post. Excuse me. So I just want to show you the code snippet really quick. I literally grabbed this. I'm not a developer. I'm a terrible developer. This is directly off Stack Overflow. I Googled run PowerShell C#, and this is what I got. Basically, all I did was swap out this command right here, which I'll be talking about in a second, but all we're really doing is opening up a command prompt that's hidden, feeding it some arguments, and starting the process. It's just that simple. So when you set one of these up, and you compile the program, it's gonna create a bunch of different files. All you have to do is zip them up, throw them on a web server, and then you link to an application file that's set up. So I'll just show you my web server really quick. So basically, besides that application, that's the application that's going to run setup.exe. I don't even know what that does, but it does something with everything. And then there's some other application files. Like I said, I don't honestly know what they do, but I know that it works. You can go read up more on ClickOnce if you want to figure that out. So that's what you're going to get once you compile. But before we get this going, we need to talk a little bit about our command and what we're actually doing there. So I'm going to run through all the tools I'm going to use, and then I'm going to do the demo at the end. So what we're going to be using for C2 or command and control with this scenario is Empire. If you haven't heard of Empire, go check it out. It's an amazing tool. Really fun to play with, whether you're on the red team or the blue team. It does a lot of cool stuff. They just dropped the second iteration of it, version 2, which has a lot of support for OSX, which is the Python portion of it. This tool is done by the Varus Group, Adaptive Threat Division. There's a lot of other contributors. HarmDroid does tons and tons of work on it. I know there's other ones. Go check out their website, and they've got the credit for everybody. But it's a PowerShell and Python post-exploitation agent. It does everything. If you've been on the red team side for any amount of time, you know about all the different PowerShell attacks. I'm sure you've been to the PowerShell Mafia GitHub. Well, a lot of the amazing tools that have been developed using weaponizing PowerShell in the last few years have all been baked directly into Empire. So basically, you don't have to mess around with the crappy syntax and pulling down scripts and all this. If you can get an Empire agent on a system, you can use all this awesome different PowerShell tools to enumerate, exploit, run shellcode, do all sorts of awesome stuff. So the ones we're going to be looking at today, few modules, is PowerView. So we're going to be using PowerView functionality within Empire to enumerate the network. Get GPP. If you don't know what group policy password files are, I'll go over that when we get to it. But basically, we're going to use it to extract clear text passwords from some group policy files. And then finally, we're going to talk about Kerberoast. Actually, going to talk about that right now. So Kerberoast is a tool or more of a technique that was dropped by Tim Medin in like 2014. It used to be a fairly manual process, but it's been automated over the years. There's Harmjoy and Mubix have really, really awesome blog posts on this topic. I read them extensively when I was developing this, so I definitely recommend going and checking this out. Just want to make sure. So basically, what you're doing is exploiting service principal names and their associated Kerberoast tickets within Active Directory. So a service principal name, and this is straight from Microsoft, is a unique identifier of a service instance. SPNs are used by Kerberoast to authenticate, associate a service instance with a service logon account. And then this is straight from Mubix's blog. Basically, you're mapping a service running on a server to an account it's running as so that it can do or accept Kerberoast authentication. So basically, when you have running service accounts and you tie it to a domain user, it needs to be able to authenticate to Kerberoast. So that's what the service principal names are used for. What's cool about this technique and pulling tickets from service principal names is any domain user can request a Kerberoast ticket for any service, and domain trusts are in scope. So if you have a forest, you have domain A, domain B, and you have a domain user on domain A, you can request, and there's a trust relationship between the domains, you can request SPN tickets for domain B, which is pretty cool. Once you have the tickets, you can pull them down and crack them offline. With Empire, it sticks them right into the right hash format for you. You can choose Hashcat or John the Ripper. You used to have to run some scripts to convert them to the right format. Cool thing about the cool thing about these accounts too is they're frequently configured with bad passwords that never change, and a lot of times the permissions are misconfigured with service accounts as well. So they'll be running as domain admin, or at least maybe have local admin on some servers, things like that. So we're going to pull some Kerberoast tickets in a second, but first I want to talk about a little bit about Metasploit. If you don't know what Metasploit is, and you're in the security realm, you've probably been living under a rock. It's an exploitation framework developed by H.D. Moore. Does a lot of really cool stuff. I honestly don't use it for exploitation very much. What I mostly use it for is C2, the auxiliary modules, and post-exploitation. So interpreter shell baked into Metasploit, really awesome. A ton of functionality baked right into it for post-exploitation. The auxiliary modules some of them are really good. I used to use them a lot more, but now a lot of that functionality has been baked into different PowerShell tools, but I still like to keep this in my back pocket if I need it. My favorite thing about it to use Metasploit for is tunneling. It just makes it really, really easy. It's really easy to forward ports and pivot through systems basically to attack other systems. So that's what we're going to be using it for today, and we'll show that in a second. Finally, quickly want to talk about Mimikatz. Again, if you don't know what Mimikatz is, you've probably been living under a rock. It's a tool developed by Benjamin Deppley, or Gentle Kiwi. Straight from his blog, it's a little tool to play with Windows security. If you know what it is, it's a lot more than a little tool. Does a lot of really cool things. You can extract plain text passwords from memory. You can extract hashes, tickets. You can launch past the hash attacks, launch past the ticket attacks, do golden ticket attacks. There's also something called silver ticket attacks that I've just discovered. I got to read up on that. But basically a ton of cool stuff that you can do with Mimikatz. So we're going to be demonstrating that one today too. So now we're ready for the fun stuff, the demos. Let's all hope this works. First thing I want to show you is Empire. If you haven't used Empire, it's a really, really cool tool. Basically with an Empire there's modules, which are going to be your PowerView, invoke shellcode, all the different things you can do with it. Then there's listeners, pretty much the same as an exploit handler. If you're familiar with Metasploit, it's going to listen for incoming connections. And then there's agents, which is your basically the beacon that's going to connect back and forth and send your commands up and down, similar to an interpreter shell. So just set up listeners. I already have one set up. You basically just type listeners, then I think it's use listeners. Show you some info on it. Basically all this is already set and ready to go. The only thing I did was change the port to 8080 because we're already hosting our website on port 80, so we needed to choose an open port. Once you have that, you just type execute. You'll start your listener. Once you have your listener, you can type launcher and then the development framework you want to use, either Python or PowerShell. When you do that, and I forgot the listener name, it's going to give you this big long command. This is what I stuck with in my ClickOnce code. Basically, we're just going to open up a PowerShell window, there's some bypass flags for execution policy and things like that, and then we're going to feed it this big long encoded command that's going to be a script that's going to send back our agent. So we have that. That's within our ClickOnce. I was going to actually send a phishing email, but it didn't want to go when I was testing right before this, so we're just going to go and look at our user's inbox. So this is our user, Bob. He is an end user on this network. He's not very smart, so he's going to run and click on this phishing email. So basically, here we are at our Office 365 site. He logs into this every day. This looks good. Doesn't want to lose access to his email. Just sign in. And we're going to click update right here. I just realized I lost my screenshot. I had an issue with the PowerPoint this morning, but it's called ClickOnce. In reality, it pops open a box. If you ever installed Chrome, I think pretty recently they started doing this, but Chrome is installed with ClickOnce. And basically, it pops open a box and it just gives, I think it says unknown publisher, the name of the application. It says, do you want to run this? You click run, it's going to run your code for you. I was going to show a screenshot, but like I said, I missed that. Go Google it, it's right there. So we ran our code, now we have a new agent. So we can type agent, and we've actually got two of them. I'm not sure why, one of those I must have been testing, but we're going to interact with the second one, the newer one. So we're going to rename that so it's easier to work with. Call this Bob. Now we can interact with Bob. Type info, we get a bunch of system information. And now we're ready to start actually doing some network enumeration. So like I said, we're going to use PowerShell for that. I don't remember the name of the modules. I just want to know I want to use PowerView, so we're going to search module, PowerView, and it's going to give us all the modules within the PowerShell or PowerView folder. So there's all sorts of really awesome stuff you can do. Look through these. If you're familiar with PowerView, pretty much everything's baked in, I think. But we just want to do some general enumeration. So the first thing we want is a list of users on the network, or a list of computers on the network. So we're going to go use module, situational awareness, network, PowerView, get computer. There are some options you can set. We don't need to set any of them. We're ready to go. So we're just going to click run. Should start a job for us. And it's going to kick us back all the computers. Keep in mind, there's only 3 computers on my network, but if you run this in a 50,000 node network, you're going to get a lot of output. So you want to be able to output this to a file so you can parse through it later and access it as you're trying to elevate privileges. But we got our 3 servers, DC01, App Server 01, and Workstation 01. Next, we want to get an idea of the types of users we have. So we're going to use another PowerView module. Use module, situational awareness, network, PowerView. Get user. Same thing, don't need to set anything. We're going to run that. Again, if there's a lot of users on the network, you're going to get a lot of output. You're going to want to stick this out to a file. That ran. So if we start looking through this list, we can see the different users, and this is a little messy, a lot of information there, but so like I said, best to output to a file so you can parse through it. So here we have our administrator account on the domain. You can see it's a member of the domain admins group. Let's scroll down a little bit farther. There's some built-in Microsoft accounts in there, I think. Then we got this app server admin. Looks like it's in a server admin group, so that might be a good account we might want to target. Down here we've got Bob. We already know about Bob, so we're not worried about that. Here's something interesting though. We have a service principal name for an MS SQL account. Looks like there's an account called SQL Server, and it's running on App Server 01. So definitely want to keep that in our back pocket and check back on that later when we're trying to elevate privileges. But before we go and check out Kerberoast, I want to show you my all-time favorite Active Directory misconfiguration, which is get group policy password file. If you don't know what that is, basically when you create group policy files and associate, well really when you create any group policy file or group policy object, all sorts of configuration files are created and stuck on the sysball share of the domain controller. So when a client boots up, it's going to check into the domain controller, check those configuration files to apply the settings. If you create a GPO that has a password associated with it, like let's say you push out a local admin password to all your clients, and there is there's a password there, an encrypted version of that password gets stored on that share. For some reason, Microsoft, in their infinite wisdom, released the key that they use to encrypt those passwords. I've heard it was a mistake. I've heard they did it on purpose. I don't really know, but basically with a little Ruby script, you can grab those passwords right out of the sysball share, decrypt them, and sometimes you have local admin. I found domain admins. I found all sorts of good passwords. You can do this with a manual process. There's a PowerShell script you can run to do it, or since we're using Empire, it's baked right in. So let's do that quick. GPP. So use module. Privilege escalation, GPP. Again, we don't have to set anything with this. It's just going to go check, scrape the passwords, decrypt them for us, and print them to the screen. So as you can see, it went and it found that there's a local admin password that's been pushed out to the clients, and it's got this local pass right here. And it gives the path where it found it. It's in a groups.xml file on our domain controller. So if we wanted to with Empire, we could just start passing that around and see if we could get access to any other systems. But I want to show you some tools outside of Empire. I didn't want to just do an Empire demo, but I very well could have. Seriously, go check it out. It does so many cool things. So before we use that local pass, I want to check out that service principal name I found and show you guys how Kerberoast works. We are going to use Empire for that. So again, we're going to search module. Why is this? Oh, I got to do back. Kerberoast. So we're going to use that module. Credentials, Kerberoast. Invoke Kerberoast. Info. So the only thing I set here is the output format. I think by default it's on Hashcat. I have John installed on my Mac, so that's what I'm going to use for password cracking, so I just changed the output. We're going to run that. Starting another job for us. As you see, it kicked out a nice Kerberoast ticket for our SQL service account. So now we can see if that has a bad password, see if we can crack that offline. So I already copied this over. Oops, that's not what I want to do. So we have our hash here. I have a word list that has the password in it because I want this to go quick. So we just got to spin up John. I really need to put this in my path. John's working, so we're just going to specify our hash file, -- word list equals to list. Going to run that. As we can see right here, we cracked our password. So now we have the clear text password for this service account. It's a domain account, so we can probably log in with it unless they've specifically disabled interactive logins, which you should definitely do for all your service accounts. So I want to try an RDP because I like using the GUI. So we need to figure out a way that we can tunnel through this workstation we exploited in order to RDP to other systems on the network. So that's where Metasploit comes in. Great tool for tunneling. So we need to set up a handler to receive our session. I've already done this. So basically I just give the IP address, the port to connect back on. Since we're going through a firewall, I want to use 443. It's pretty unlikely that outbound 443 is going to be blocked, so this way we'll avoid any egress filtering rules that might be in place. So we're going to exploit that and start a job. And so we're good to go there. So now we need to find a way to inject our shellcode. Once again, you can just inject shellcode with Empire really, really easily. Once again, the search function is really awesome. I probably should have memorized these by now, but I keep doing it. And we're just going to search shellcode. And right here, we have code execution, invoke shellcode. So that's what we're going to use. Use module, code execution, invoke shellcode. Info, so we need to tell it where to connect back to. So we're going to set the L host 172.16.11.120, which is our Kali box. Set the L port 443. One more time, info. We already have the reverse HTTPS payload ready to go, so this should work. We're just going to type execute and see if we get our interpreter session. And we did. So now we have a session, a interpreter session to Bob's workstation, so we can interact with that. PS, make sure it's live. We can see processes, so we know we're good. So now we need to set up our port forwarding since we're going to tunnel through this. So the port forward command is super easy. You only need a couple options. What we're going to need is the local port from our Kali instance that we want to forward. The remote port we want to connect to. So on the system we're going to pivot through the interpreter session and hit another system. So we need the port we're going to connect to there. Since we're doing RDP, it's going to be 3389. And then finally the remote host we're going to connect to. So we're going to do port forward. We're going to add a route. So -L. The local port to listen on, we're going to do 3389. The remote port to connect to, again, it's going to be 3389. Why do I keep doing that? And then the remote host, which is going to be our app server over here. Sure that thing's still up. 172.16.211.133. Our domain controller is going to be 134. So we have that set up. Now all we have to do to connect to that system is our desktop to 127.0.0.1. So remember, we're forwarding our local port through the interpreter to the remote port on the system we're trying to connect to. This has been giving me trouble, of course. Thank you, Matthew. So we got to flush that out. 3389. Try this one more time. And there we go. Now we're RDPing through our interpreter session to the system we want to hit. We need to log into our domain, which is fake STSU, and our account is SQL service. We're going to type that password in. And boom, we're RDP'd in. So we're going to hope that there's some administrators logged into this system. I'm getting a little short on time, so I'm just going to tell you there are administrators logged into this system. So we need to find a way to run Mimikatz on this system. I don't like touching disk. There's no AV on this computer, but when at all costs, always avoid touching disk on a penetration test. So we're going to use PowerShell, the traditional method, to run our code. Basically, I've hosted an invoke Mimikatz PowerShell script right here. We're going to use a command to a PowerShell command to pull that down from our system, and we're going to pull it down from our web server, inject it right into memory without ever touching disk, and run it. We got to be running as an administrator. for Mimikatz to work. So I've got that command here. I think got all my passwords there too, if you guys take a look at. So basically what we're doing here is the IEX, and I realize that's really small, invoke inspection, opening up a new object. We're going to download a string, which is going to be our script that we're going to run, invoke Mimikatz, and dump creds. Let's hope this works. Had trouble with this too, so it might not work. Oh, it worked. So now we can pop back up through here and see what kind of creds we got. So right there we got our SQL password again. Not too concerned with that. But right here we see that we got our administrator, who's the domain administrator on the network. So I was going to RDP through, but again I'm running a little short on time, so we're just going to log into this system, show you that the creds work. Is this the right one? Here we go. Type our password. I am a crafty admin. And screw that up, of course. Running out of time. I can't type the password, but I'll tell you it works. So now we're domain administrator on the network. We've gone all the way up there doing a couple different techniques. Just want to recap really quick. Talk about some remediations quickly. Don't open Spotify. So, in summary, be aware of all the information you have out there online about your organization. If you're on the blue team side, use hacking tools. Go see what the hackers are going to do to try and enumerate information about your network, and then try and protect yourself. Always be tweaking your spam filters. You cannot set up a spam filter and just leave it forever. You should constantly be updating the definitions, updating malicious domains, and testing it to make sure that it actually works. Never stop training your end users. Not going to lie, you're fighting an uphill battle here, but the more visibility they see into phishing attacks, and if you reward your users for reporting phishing attacks, the better off you're going to be. Disable ClickOnce if you're not using it, which most people don't. You can just disable some trust relationships within Internet Explorer, and it should prevent it from running. Don't use SPNs for service accounts. There's managed service accounts within Active Directory now you can use that work much better. They lock down the authentication and do some other things to make them more secure. But I have heard there's issues with that too, so do your research. If you are going to use SPNs, assign strong passwords. Do not use group policy to push passwords. There's actually a patch push now that doesn't allow you to do this, but we still, almost on a weekly basis, find organizations with stale passwords sitting in there, sitting in the sysvol share, the domain controller, that might be a few years old, but they're still valid somewhere. And privileged account management, if that administrator hadn't been logged into that server, I wouldn't have been able to Mimikatz his password. Privileged account management is really, really big. There's I really recommend doing an audit of all your administrative accounts on your domain and, figure out how you can, get rid of those as much as possible and limit their exposure on the network. Finally, I just have a list of all the tools I use. So since I'm running out of time, is there any questions? All right, well, thanks a lot.